And yeah, there we go. So there we are absolutely live. Okay, so welcome to anybody and everybody who's tuning in tonight to listen to us talk about some of the latest GlenAllachie releases. Hopefully you all got your sample sets and you've maybe got them there ready to pour tonight. You talk us through that, and also to answer any questions, guys. Please get questions in. We've got about an hour and a bit tonight, so you'll fire your questions in. Kat and I'll keep an eye on them, and hopefully we can fire our way through some of the questions and everything you want to know about GlenAllachie. See if we can answer those for you. Welcome, Ross. Welcome, Dave. Good to see you both in. So, to many of, or a few of you maybe have seen in the shop before. Kat's been with us for, gosh, how long now? 3 or 4 months?
Like, I don't, let's call it 6 months. Just let's round up.
Time flies. But some of you might know Kat from Glengarry, where she's been for a number of years now, and conducts the tours and all sorts of stuff there. So welcome, Kat, and also welcome, Ronan. And we'll pass on to Ronan to start to introduce where we're going with the evening tonight.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm Ronan. I obviously work for GlenAllachie, unsurprisingly. Welcome to my kitchen. I sort of I've got a bit of everything on the go just now, really, when it comes to GlenAllachie. Many different hats. Sort of heading up the sales team just now, and then also working alongside, or sort of working beside Billy in a way, trying to learn how he does what he does. And just sort of try to learn that side of things as well. So, yeah, as Russell says, any sort of questions or anything about GlenAllachie or anything really, I'm more than happy to ask. And the general sort of idea tonight is to run through 2 different sort of brands that we've got, GlenAllachie and then White Heather, and then delving into the core range of GlenAllachie and what we do, and then sort of the more innovative experimental stuff that Billy sort of has really got a hold of and loves working with, some different experimental wood. Some wood you may have seen before, or releases that were similar to what we've done before, but they all have their each individual uniqueness to them, and there's reasons why we do them and why we think they're ready at that point, and at the age and the strength and everything. So yeah, any questions, more than welcome, and we can run through the drams, and generally just try to have I'm usually quite a casual person, just a casual sort of good laugh for a Friday night, and maybe learn something about GlenAllachie as well.
Can I just ask a wee question about yourself, Ronan? In terms of the background in the industry, I mean, obviously you're heavily involved with GlenAllachie these days. What was your kind of background to getting involved with the industry along the way?
So I finished uni in moved down to Campbelltown in the year 2000 when I was just a wee boy, and so I grew up most of my time in Campbelltown, which is obviously synonymous with the whisky industry in general. And then went away to uni, came back and was working in bars and stuff. And my younger brother Todd, who will not thank me for mentioning his name, was working as a tour guide and in the shop at Springbank in the Cadenhead shop. And I sort of asked him one day, look, any chance I could get a shift, really? I'm sort of sick of working in bars and stuff like that. So from that, eventually started working for Cadenhead, and then started working for Springbank and Kilkerran, and then seen an opportunity at GlenAllachie that I thought, not a sure thing, but you've got someone like Billy Walker behind it, and it's for what he's done in the industry previously. He thought, like, if you're going to take a chance, this is quite a sure bet sort of thing. So I thought, yeah, why not? And then moved up and started working for GlenAllachie. Yeah, I think I was maybe at Springbank and Kilkerran for about 3.5 years, and then I'm thinking about 3.5 years here as well. So yeah. I only like working for small independent distilleries.
I was going to say you only like working for the most popular brands out there.
Well, yeah, it's if you're gonna get chosen or picked by a brand to work for them, make sure it's a good one. I suppose makes their life easier.
Absolutely, fantastic.
So we could just get started with the first whiskey.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
sure.
What was your kind of proposed running order tonight? What were you thinking?
So I think we'll start with the 8-year-old, and great introductory dram.
Yeah.
A great new whiskey from us. One we've just recently released. And then we'll go the French oak, the Chinkapin oak, We'll then finish the oak series with this 15-year-old Scottish oak. Then we'll dive into the White Heather 15, and then we'll finish on the 10-year-old cask strength batch 7.
Very exciting.
Yeah. So the 8-year-old, as I said, is quite a new whiskey that we released from GlenAllachie. Something we've been working on for quite some time. We wanted to be able to offer something at a slightly lower price, but still had the sort of characteristics and the DNA of what GlenAllachie is, or what we've tried to make it. A lot of the similar flavours you would look at the 12-year-old and the 15-year-old or the 10-year-old cask strength as well. And we really wanted just to showcase how great, a younger whiskey can be, and how age doesn't necessarily match quality. It's all about the sort of spirit inside as well. So we're a combination of PX and all, also casks, which are obviously synonymous with what we're doing at GlenAllachie. Some virgin oaks, some American virgin oak, and then some Rioja red wine in there as well, which is, I think, from when we look at the 8-year-old and the 10-year-old and the 12-year-old, is really sort of what we've positioned GlenAllachie spirit into being. It's a great spirit to work with. Even before Billy Walker took over it, which is obviously where the spirits came from, it was always a heavy spirit, a thick spirit. It's good sort of syrupy sort of feel to it, and quite like sticks to your mouth anyway. That it's very versatile. That's why Chivas used it for their blends to put other distilleries on top of. It's because it had a really good base to it, and they just built from that. And yeah, when we start putting it into different cask types, it holds up as well. So it's fun to work with in that aspect. As you know, you can sort of move it around and try different things, and it'll still hold this sort of heather, honey, mocha sort of buttery sort of base to it as well.
So this is still spirit that Billy inherited from the takeover. Yeah.
So what we're looking at really, 2017, 2027 would be the first 10-year-old cask strength that would be Billy Walker GlenAllachie. Obviously then 2025 would be the first 8-year-old, and so on. Billy sort of says that he wants to see the 12-year-old being his sort of 12-year-old.
Okay.
And then I don't know, he'll start thinking about retirement or something. I don't know.
At some point, maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's his sort of goal that he's looking for.
Yeah.
Which is a great goal to have, because
yes,
it's fun. It's a fun sort of.
Absolutely. There's certainly people picking up the butterscotch note, which GlenAllachie is renowned for.
As I said, it's quite a viscous, thick, juicy spirit. A lot of butterscotch, a lot of honey, I find. And it adapts really well to being introduced to PX and all, or also sherry. We only use first or second fill casks as well, so the cask itself is so much life still left in it at that time that it's picking up the different flavours that these casks can give you. So you start getting a little bit of the sort of molasses or the dried berries and the mocha and the cinnamon, which is sort of typical when you add a little bit of the red wine in. The Rioja, start taking a little bit of the red currants and the sort of more, I find, more the sort of marzipan sort of flavour.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of the thickness of the spirit that I've mentioned quite a few times and will mention quite a lot, you'll probably get sick of me saying it. It does like a nice long sort of finish to it. It's bottled at 46. Obviously, we don't chill filter or add any colour. And I always find that even when I'm trying a new whiskey, that tends to be when I drink whiskey as well, I always like adding a couple of drops in as well, just to let it see it open up and see what it can do. And then I know whether I prefer it, the strength it's bottled at, or the water that I've added.
Because this is 46%, which again, and the decision for the 46%, I mean, was that something Billy specifically wanted to do? I'm thinking, back in Glendronach with 43 would have been the strength. So was that a conscious decision to kind of step it up to 46?
I think 46 or above pretty much gives you a guarantee of what it's going to be like when it arrives on a market. In the sense that if it drops below 43 or below, you run the risk of developing flock within the bottle, and then people start looking at it and going, my whiskey's not right. So 46 or above sort of takes that away. And then if you are in the position where you're going to start developing flock, 43 is pretty much the last sort of ABV you can work from. Anything below that, people might not say they chill filter, but if they're below that, then
The suspect.
you probably do. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that. There is logical reasons that you would want to do that. It's just we chose to do 46 or above. We do a range at 48, our wines, woods and oaks at 48. Then our single casks are cask strength, and we obviously have our batch releases that are cask strength as well. I think it's just a decision. I think it's a strength at 46 that Billy finds that GlenAllachie is quite comfortable with him. Between 46 and 48 as a drinking whiskey, that it works within those strengths very, very well.
Yeah, it's much. The guys are saying there's a lot of depth in there. It is much fruitier than the 12 and the 15. The sherry notes are there, but they're not. The red wine seems to be more influential, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think the difference between the sort of 8 and the 12 and the 15 is obviously if you work from the 15 downwards, the 15 is the most sherried. The 12-year-old is a little bit less because it's got a little bit of Rioch and virgin oak in there as well. And then you move to the 8-year-old, and it is. I would agree with what the people are saying that you do get a little bit more of the red wine fruit in there rather than the sort of dark berries or the brambles and things that you can get from PX and Oloroso. So it's just it's similar to what the other products we do in the core range, but it's got its own little take to it as well, which makes it quite appealing as a whiskey, I guess. It just gives a little bit of different dimension to what we release.
Yeah, absolutely. You're wanting that to be the case with the range, so that you don't want whiskies to be the same, but just different ages. You want character in each kind of one as well, don't you? And that's going to make you go back for it. Poor cat's got the cold tonight, so maybe not able to pick up much.
I love anything that's got a Rioja in it. I'm like smelling like I really want to smell a Rioja.
Yeah,
but it tastes lovely. It does taste lovely. It's going to cure me of my cold, I'm sure.
Oh, it definitely should do. If not now, then by the time we try the 10-year-old cask strength, the cold will be the last thing you're thinking of, I think.
I think so. Definitely. It's very easy to drink anyway.
Poor Alistair's stuck offshore. He's obviously not going to be able to drink tonight, but he's going to catch up when he gets home. Good to see you joining in, Alistair.
Being offshore must be really, really boring if you're tuning in to listen to me.
I can imagine I've never been. I can imagine downtime is not the most entertaining. Yeah.
Yeah. The 8-year-old is something we've recently released. It's, as I said, we wanted to offer something that was more affordable than the 12-year-old, I guess. That people can crack open a bottle and enjoy and try and see how we're developing the range, really. It was a fun one to work with because you were trying to, obviously you do still have a slight youthfulness to it, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I often think, and people think, oh, there's a spirit sort of taste, not a spirit taste, but it could be sharp. See if that's within a flavour sort of profile or characteristics that you're looking for, and it's an addition. Because if it didn't have any alcohol in it, you'd pretty much be able to taste it didn't have any alcohol in it. So you want that alcohol to be a flavour, I think, within the dram itself. It's like when people might describe whiskies as something being quite bitter. If it's managed and it's handled, bitter can be a good flavour to have within the dram itself. So but then if it is too much for you, feel free to add some water. That's definitely fine.
There's a fantastic analogy in sport that says if you're good enough, you're old enough. And I would agree with the same thing with whiskey. I mean, some young whiskies can be a little bit tamed and a little bit rough, but this isn't. This is a product of the Youth Academy that's coming through strong, and you're thinking, this is quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, it was a similar. Not to speak about another brand, Billy will kill me for it. But when I worked for Kilkerran and we were looking at the sort of peated range that Kilkerran were producing, we were like, look, this is good enough to release now. At a younger age, and similar to what we're doing at GlenAllachie in terms of that side of things, is we're tasting stuff that is 1.5 to maybe 2.5, 3 years old, and we're going. It is a waiting game till you're able to actually release it. And if you're right, if it tastes good enough and it's at whatever age, then release it. We are sitting in a situation just now where we've got some Billy Walker produced GlenAllachies that we're really, really fascinated by and really looking forward to getting them out there. It is just a waiting game, and I guess you can't make whiskey overnight, really. So that's what we're waiting on.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. I mean, it is exciting. Everybody that's on tonight is obviously very excited by GlenAllachie. There's so much love for what's going on there. There's so much love for Billy and all you guys. I mean, I think everybody that's involved with the distillery is very accessible, from Karen in the shop to Lindsay in the warehouse. It's one of these distilleries where you do get properly to know people, and seeing all the warehouses. Just imagining what's going on in there when you're kind of driving into the distilleries. Great and exciting.
We've got an unbelievably great team from, we'll say, between the sales and marketing team to the guys in the shipping department and the bottling department. I often say these people are the ones that are actually working hard, the bottling and the shipping, not the sales team. The guys in the warehouse, Lindsay and his team are flat out 14, 15 hours a day or something, Monday to Friday. Like, these guys are doing really hard work, and it's because of them doing that hard work that Billy, and to a lesser extent myself, can turn around with these whiskies and go, look how good they are. Everything, not everything, but the majority of what we inherited in 2017 was in bourbon, refill bourbon. Yeah. So it's a huge undertaking for a small amount of people to get in and start re-racking and changing things around and moving the direction of flavour of GlenAllachie. And what's put in the glass is, like Billy's the master blender, and it's obviously his decision and stuff, but the guys in the warehouse that are doing the sort of hard labour, and they're top guys that are doing it. And I mean, you then go into the shop and it's brilliant as well. The staff in there are absolutely fantastic as well. So we've got a small team, but a great team as well, which is great in a small company. You want everybody to sort of muck in and really put everything they've got into it.
And you definitely get that feel. I mean, the passion comes across. It's not something you have to look for. It's completely evident in everybody. The way that they talk about what's going on in the distillery, and the willingness to kind of talk about what they do and show you what they do, and it's just fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. And Dave was asking a question. What was the ABV before bottling?
I seen Dave was trying to ask that question.
Abu. What was the Abu?
I thought maybe Dave had some after work drinks before getting here. But the ABV would have been around, for the 8-year-old, you were probably talking around 57 to 60% is what we were probably looking at. Maybe closer to the 57 sort of percent there. Then what we tend to do in Billy's lab is we'll reduce it down to sort of 50.5, see what it's like, knowing full well that we'll reduce it to 46, but we always sort of reduce it a little bit, and then we take it a stage further as well. We don't want to let the water sort of take over when we're adding water to the whiskey. We sort of gradually do it in stages, like you do when you're filling or reducing or whatever. So we do it gradually, and then we create pilot samples, pre-bottling pilot samples to an unbelievable degree. I don't know of anyone else that would do as much as we do in that aspect. Before a bottling of this 8-year-old, we've probably created 3 or 4 pilot samples on the run-up, just to make sure everything is ticking over and we're doing what we're doing. And the great thing about a small company like this, and sort of going around the houses to answer your question, Dave, is that these pilot samples are then shared with the team as well to see what the team like. And we've got a good outspoken team. Not everybody's going to say they like it or anything like that. That is honest opinions, and it's great to get loads of people's different opinions on what we're producing and whether they like it, whether they don't like it. And to answer your question, Dave, this would have been about 58% probably.
So Ross has come in. He's getting lovely milk chocolate on the palate. I would agree. I'm definitely getting that on the finish for sure. Superb. Really surprised with this one. Samples a lot more flavoursome than an 8-year-old dram. It's the first time Ross has had it. Be interesting to see what age people would guess. Yeah, it would be interesting to see what age people thought it was in a blind tasting. Have you actually done many blind tastings with it?
I've not done any blind tastings with it. it only really came out in March. So a lot of part of the world, maybe just the UK and slight markets in Europe as well, have actually managed to get this in and get it on a shelf, and then for people to open it and stuff. So a lot of time I look after the Asian markets, and they've yet to see their 8-year-olds, and some of them are yet to see the 10-year-old cash strength batch 7. Yeah. So they're sort of you do work at a slightly different pace.
Yeah.
But it is a great dram, and speaking from more of a whiskey drinker's point of view, it is. If somebody gave me that and told me that was 8 years old, I'd be surprised at that. Yeah. I think it's got quality that far goes beyond what you'd assume its age, which is good, which is great. Yeah, it's a good problem. Yeah.
Do you think the fact it's oh, sorry.
No, carry on.
I guess, do you think the fact it's non-chill filtered helps with that, because it's a higher ABV and it's quite young? You still got that really oily base that helps like dissipate sort of the youth. Do you think that helps behind it?
Yes, but I wouldn't say it was overly the deciding factor as to why it's good or so good, or you don't really get that youthfulness. Yeah, by not stripping out all the oils and all the fats and everything that makes a whiskey great, we are leaving the thick body there. It doesn't. Usually, sometimes with younger whiskies, you can think they're quite light or thin, and with this, you don't really get that. I don't think.
Yeah.
So you still got all the oils and the fats and the esters and stuff in there. And then the cask types we've used as well obviously play a big part in the injection of flavour in that aspect. But yeah, I would say it's part of why it maybe doesn't come across as young as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots of kind of deep. I mean, Gavin's mentioning black cherry in there as well, and totally get that. I mean, I love when people put tasting notes up, and often it can be suggestive, but sometimes you're like, oh yeah, that's definitely that kind of depth, a long finish in there as well. Yeah, just sublime for such a young whiskey. Absolutely fantastic. People certainly enjoying it. Alistair's asking if Billy's going to take his boot for Seville. Alistair, if you know, there's no place for football or politics on a whiskey tasting. I'm sure he has, but we'll just ignore that.
We're not doing football. I've already told Russell I don't understand football analogies. So, no football.
Football and politics do not have a place on a whiskey tasting whatsoever.
Definitely not.
So I'll just move quickly on from that one.
Yeah, that's fine. I would know the answer anyway.
Absolutely, yeah. So Dave's finding it a wee bit sharp. Not an everyday drinker. Maybe try a wee bit of water in there, Dave. So I don't know if you've tried a little drop in.
The great thing about Scotch whisky in general, not just GlenAllachie, is that it's not every whisky isn't for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's the great thing about it. I would leave a little bit in the glass, Dave, and let it air out a little, and maybe go back to it after a couple and see what you think, and maybe just a little bit of sort of oxidization to it could help. Yeah, it might not for you, but it might. So I would maybe do that before adding water. But yeah.
I always do that in a tasting with, but particularly from one distillery. Maybe not so much when I'm doing different stuff, but especially if you're going through a range from one distillery, always then leave some and go back to where you started. And it's amazing the different flavors you pick up on the way through.
I think as well, now 7 o'clock is a good time to have a whiskey, don't get me wrong, but when you're doing a tasting like this and you've got the same distillery and you're running through different expressions of the same distillery and you're trying to pick up different flavors because the cask types are slightly different, you've been through a whole day. Some of us would have had 3 meals, maybe 2 meals, and maybe I've had a drink after work before coming to this. So your palate has changed from when it was in the morning to where it is now, and your palate just changes throughout the day. The same as the first whiskey will taste different. If you save some and taste it at the end, it will come across different. And the best time to try whiskey is probably about 9 o'clock in the morning, after you've had a glass of water and maybe a coffee, and your palate is pretty clean, it's fresh, and that's when you can really sort of try and pick out specific flavors. And when you're tasting, 6 whiskies we're tasting side by side of the same, apart from the White Heather, of the same distillery, it's easier to pick it out when your palate hasn't went through so much in the day. Now, I'm not recommending everybody just starts getting tanned at 9 o'clock in the morning, claiming
sounds good to me, but maybe
claiming they're doing a whiskey tasting. But that to me would be the best thing. That's when we go in to try and write tasting notes for our products and single casks and stuff. When your palate's at its freshest.
I'm always intrigued by tasting notes. I love everything about tasting notes. I love how flamboyant and amazing they can be. If anybody's listening out there that works in the whiskey world and wants to give me a job in tasting notes, I'm there. Anything to do with tasting notes, I love it.
It's I remember when I started working alongside Billy in this, like that sort of aspect of the role, I remember he turned to me and said, "Now write tasting notes for this. Make them similar, but not too similar. But don't make them too different at the same time."
Nice and vague and precise at the same time there.
I thought I just took my head in my hands and I thought, I've got no idea. But yeah, I mean, writing tasting notes is a fun part of the job. It's fun even when you're trying whiskies that's got nothing to do with the job, actually trying to note down things that you get. And I'm quite I wouldn't say whiskey enthusiast, but I quite like listening to people speak about their whiskies and the tasting notes that they get. Yeah. Especially when it's sort of things that maybe you can't articulate from what you're getting on your palate to actually speaking it so well, but listening to other people say what they get, whether within the industry or just someone having a dram. I think it's really fascinating to listen to how sort of different people's sort of thought processes work, or how their palates are different and picking up slightly different things, but maybe sometimes that you didn't think was actually possible to pick up in a whiskey, or it's slightly different. Then you listen to some and you just go, that's a whole load of tosh, you've just made that up completely.
We've had to Google a few things, and one of them was like the resin that violin strings are soaked in, and we're like, there's only like maybe 3% of the population globally that's going to know what that is. So
yeah.
Like, the fact you're going to taste that in a whiskey is quite slim.
I remember in a tasting someone saying to me, like, it's quite a chalky sort of dusty, like if you were to lick a pebble. And I thought, like, who's walking around doing that?
Called a pebble licker.
Yeah, I thought it was just like, that's fine. Obviously, people do different things with their spare time, and that's fine.
Everybody needs a hobby.
Yeah.
Hashtag no judgment, safe space, and all that.
Yeah. Lick all the pebbles you want, but if I'm writing down tasting notes or something, I try my best not to get carried away within yourself and try to actually make them relatable, that people might can actually relate to and go, yeah, maybe I've not tasted that, but I sort of know what he's talking about.
So do you consciously, when you're trying something new or like eating or drinking, do you consciously try and sort of, I don't know, write stuff down or remember stuff, or try and like recall sort of certain moments when you're like, oh yeah, that's just like that sort of dinner out in the Riviera when we had a bramble souffle or something? Because that's how you live, obviously.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. From a pokey 2-bedroom flat in Denniston in Glasgow, I'm switching that with the Riviera.
I totally Instagram stalked you. I'm just stealing everything off your Instagram.
The Clyde Riviera.
The Clyde. I'm more of a person, and it's not great for trying to write tasting notes, I guess, but I'm more of a person that if I taste something, it reminds me of something, and not necessarily a food or a drink or a flavour. It's like an occasion.
Yeah.
If you could write tasting notes with occasions and be like, this is when I went on holiday to this place and it reminds me of that because we had food, but I can't remember the food. I could write them quite easily, I think. But no, I try not to eat my dinner and think, God, I could use that in a tasting note. I think that's extremely taking your work home with you, sort of thing. But no, I try to I look at the cask types, and then they sort of, right, you've got so many flavours going on in this class. Do they make sense with what we're trying to do? Are you picking up something that's wild that shouldn't be there? Is that you, or is it the fact that it's wild and it's in the whiskey? And you sort of just go from there. And a bit of imagination and a bit of good fun is welcome. I always I try to just say what I think I get. You can't taste something that you've never tasted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Joe's thirsty for dram number 2 by the sound.
Can we get on with it? Yeah, I've got a real bad tendency of going off into rambles about different things.
He can get on with it. Meet us at the end. It's fine.
Absolutely, yeah. That's why you have a beer at the side, Joe, just to kind of sip away and then. To
cleanse the palate between drams, a beer is always good.
Absolutely.
So the next one we're trying, Joe, is the French Oak 10-year-old 48%. It's part of our oak series that we've released. We've released, I think, 2 batches of the different oak series. This is the second time we've released the French oak. It is exactly what it says. It is finished in French virgin oak.
It was 12-year-old last time, wasn't it?
It was 12-year-old last time. This time it's 10 years old. This time with the next whiskey, we're going to try the third whiskey when we get onto it, Joe, which will probably be about 8 o'clock, just to keep you right. You would want to try these side by side. These have essentially had the same life, are the same age, are the same strength, and the only difference is they've spent the last 2 years in different virgin oaks from different parts of the world. So when you talk about sort of terroir and wine, or you talk about Waterford when they speak about terroir in their barley, or terroir of the barley, this is sort of looking at essentially the terroir of the oak and where the oak's grown and how that has an impact in flavour. French oak is absolutely fascinating. It is delicious, smells great, and then it tastes great as well. It's one I like working with the most. It balances with GlenAllachie really well, but it also gives you a load of different flavours.
Am I right in thinking that a lot of the sherry industry actually use French oak as well? Is it more available oak in the area?
Yeah, as you would sort of put French oak and then European oak, and then you would break it down into sort of subsections, I guess, of where it's from. I would say French is probably the most popular in terms of actually used. But in terms of oak, I mean, I was reading a press release that we've put together today, and the last time I checked, we spent about 1 million to 1.5 million on wood and wood management within GlenAllachie. And I've only just been updated today when I read this press release that we're up to sort of 2.4 million pounds a year on wood, which is, for the size of company we are, is unbelievable. The wood management sort of process that we have and the different experimental things that we're trying to do, and not just virgin casks, but different wines, the ports, Madeiras, the muscatels, everything. We've got a vast warehouse of really sort of experimental stuff. Maybe not all experimental for the whiskey industry, but experimental for what maybe we do at times, or GlenAllachie. And the French oak is a part of that. It's a great sort of, they're sort of veering off from the standard core range that we've got of the sherry influence, and actually have something that was in refill bourbon before, and then into virgin oak, and the flavour profile that you sort of get from that.
So this would have been started off in bourbon.
Yeah. The majority of what we inherited in 2017 was bourbon, refill bourbon casks. And then from there onwards, as I mentioned earlier, the warehouse team and extensive re-rack process. And sometimes that it wasn't always into, let's get it into PX or also let's get it in some wine or oak. It was let's actually just put it in a first fill bourbon cask where we know the sort of provenance from, we know the quality of the bourbon that was in there, and then you can start basing the course from there. And there's nothing terribly wrong with things in refill bourbon. It's a great vessel to put new make spirit into to draw out certain flavours. But then you put it into a sort of first fill bourbon cask, it starts picking up different flavours. The spirit at the strength it is within the cask itself is going further into the oak and pulling out different solution characteristics from the oak that the previous spirit hasn't been in, especially when you start talking about sherries and wines and stuff. They're going in, I'm not an expert, but say between 10 and 20% or whatever, and they're only interacting with solutions at that ABV, and then we're putting something in at a slightly higher. It's reacting with other parts and then drawing out the flavour as well. So you've sort of got a different sort of reaction going on within the casting. That's the same with the virgin oak. Medium char, medium toasted. The spirit's getting in there, it's getting into the wood, and it's pulling out different flavours, pulling out the characteristics of where this wood has grown. If it was south facing or westerly facing, or what side of the hill it was on, whether it was flatland or on the side of a hill, like these all have different effects on the flavour that we're tasting just now. And the spirit getting in there at a high strength as well is drawing that out and produces. I think Tom Stewart quite likes it with his comments. So it's the French oak's something that's really, really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, how do you decide? I mean, obviously, the majority of whiskey that's lying in the warehouse has started off life in ex-bourbon American oak. So, I mean, in terms of the vast variety of oak that you've got there now, and I'm aware even within red wine, there's so many different red wines sitting there. The Moscatel for me a couple of years ago was the 11-year-old Moscatel was my absolute whiskey of the year. Back 2018, 19, I can't remember. How do you decide which whiskies to put into which cask? I mean, obviously everything matures differently. Is there a point when you taste something you think, yeah, we're going to pop this into French oak, we're going to pop this into Chinkapin, we're going to put this into a Rioja, or?
Well, I've asked Billy that question before, and his answer was experience. So I went, oh, brilliant! That's great. That's you're right. Now I know. I guess it's sort of you've got a fair idea of the direction that you're looking to take the distillery's characteristics or the distillery's range in general. We know, for example, how much PX and Oloroso, Rioja and Virgin Oak that we need to fulfill the 12-year-old next year, or the next year, or the next year. So you're always trying to move things into those casks so you can fulfill what we're doing with the core range. And then when somebody phones up and tell you they've got this Chateau's casks coming in, do you want them? And you say yes, you then sort of look and go, right, well, what spirit have we not worked with? What vintage? What year is it? So say 2014, 2015 stock. We've moved that into first fill bourbon. It's maturing. It's been in there for a couple of years. Let's change that into something else. And then you just evaluate it after that and sort of look, right, well, it's been in there 6 months. Let's have a taste, see what it's like. It's been in there now in a year and a half. Let's make sure that it's still maturing right. And depending on the spirit that was previously in the cask, usually determines as well how long you can afford to leave it in that cask as well. Some red wines work really quickly, some don't. Ports can be a hit or miss depending on the size of the casks or the type of port or wine or sherry that you've got in there as well. So it's just sampling and checking it, and there's a sweet spot, as Billy sometimes says, there is a sweet spot that you want to get, and that's when you should bottle it. And the only way to know that you're either coming up to that sweet point where you think, God, this is really, really good, is by sampling and tasting it and checking that it's progressing well. And the ability, we've got a lot of our casks on site, so the ability we're tasting something, thinking, look, and this is taking it in the direction that we don't particularly want. We can change that. Much to the annoyance of Lindsay and the warehouse team, we can then go and change it and get it moved into something else. But yeah, if you take a trip round to GlenAllachie, anyone, and walk round the back and look at the casks that we've got sitting outside, you'll see the sort of extensive work we're doing with casks and the pyramids that are there. For a distillery that produces 500, 550,000 litres a year, and doesn't release a hell of a lot as well when you look at it worldwide. We've got quite a vast cask sort of portfolio and ideas for the future. We've got some fascinating things in there from some wineries that I can't go into, and some other things that I was marketing would kill me for on Monday morning to speak about. But it's finding that sweet spot and then going, yeah, that's ready to bottle, or that just could do a little bit of development somewhere else. And then what do we think will work with the previous casks that we've had it in? And then you just go from there and experience, I guess, in knowing what works with each other.
Experience in a lot of lines of work counts for a lot, doesn't it? We're getting some good tasting notes coming in. Dunk, vanilla all the way for the French oak, so lots of vanilla with a bit of a coffee background. He's picking out there. Dave Fackerson's getting candy to start with. I asked Tom to expand because he just said it was different from anything he tasted, so he's really struggling to place the notes in the nose. I think sometimes that can be quite difficult. I was once in a nosing course, and it's all about educating yourself, and the only way you can do that is by continually smelling stuff and then identifying it, and that's but yeah, completely different. Incredible nosing this in the next one as well from the range. Different finishings, incredible. And Dave feels like 48%. So
yeah, I think it's a great comparison if people want to put the French and the Chinkapin side by side and sort of nose and taste in little sips and see the different flavours we're getting. As I said, relatively same journey up to being changed into different virgin oak. going back to what you were saying about you just nosing and trying to put the thoughts into actual words. I remember my first job when I started at Cadenheads, I was told to go out and try some bad whiskey.
Okay.
And that was an assignment, sort of like homework for the day. It was go out and try some bad whiskey. Not bad whiskey, but go out and try some blends that you'll get in a normal sort of pub, and see what you think of them, and then come back and taste some single cask stuff that we're trying, and you can see the difference, or you can, not necessarily good or bad or whatever, but you can see the different avenues that you're in. And it was an enjoyable sort of task at work, but it was you just nosing and tasting and trying to develop that ability to be able to say what you think when it's just a flavour. It can be quite difficult.
So Stuart's picking up Milky Way on the nose. I like that as a note. And that kind of sort of nougat, chocolate and nougat kind of note. And Gavin's honey sweet to start, fruit, apricots, and a lovely peppery tingle. Yeah.
It's quite dry, but in a nice way, like a sort of tannin kind of nice way.
Mm-hmm.
That could just be my cold. It might just be like I can't taste anything, to be honest.
It's quite a flavourless whiskey. Is that what you were looking for?
Average. No, it's very good. It is very good.
Strong notes of phlegm in there.
I had a group of French people today tell me that French oak is the best in the world. So it's definitely interesting. It's I think French people are biased, but I think anything virgin oak is really interesting. I think you get more of an honest interaction between spirit and the wood. There's nothing that the spirit can hide behind with virgin oak, which I quite like.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing wrong about being confident about what you're releasing, I guess. And if French oak's the best in the world, then fair play. Wait to hear what we say about the Scottish oak.
Well, indeed.
I'm waiting. The only reason I signed on for tonight. Otherwise, I'd be in my bed.
But, when we're looking at the two whiskies side by side, the French and the Chinkapin, even in the colour themselves, you see a difference. And then you got onto the nose, and you will start. I think the French, as people were saying, is quite sweet, fruity, apricots, as somebody said, and you do get a sort of butteriness to it as well. And the Chinkapin comes across slightly different. It's sort of licorice, aniseed, a little bit more spicier, I find. And we found with the Chinkapin, it can be quite a bit of a hit or a miss, or sort of marmite. People either love it or they hate it. They like licorice and they like those flavours, or they don't, and that's the way it is. We are big fans of it. We're excited by wood that isn't used in the industry at all for anything really. It's not used for bourbon. It's not used for rum, and it's not used in tequila or mezcal. And it's not used for it. So it's great to get it in and actually use it. It's a little bit unique. I think there was only a couple of places maybe I've used it before, but we've got quite a lot of it sitting in the warehouse, and we're big fans of the sort of flavour that it gives to GlenAllachie. And it's one of the experimental things that we really started with, trying Chinkapin oak, and that led us into then trying look at other American geniuses of oak from different parts of America and see how they differentiate.
I actually know a distillery that's done that, to be honest, but like we're not talking about my other job, so it's fine.
They've not done it. They've not done it as well as us.
I think my first experience of Chinkapin was with GlenAllachie, and I fell in love with it straight away. But I was immediately wanted to learn a bit more about it. Quercus Mecklenburgii, understood the similarities in the cellular structure with the wood to the extent that I guess, and you'll know this, that there probably has been Chinkapin staves in American oak casks for years, but not really known because it's really hard to tell apart. And there was almost that kind of thought that whenever you had if somebody said this is a really sweet cask sitting in the warehouse and they couldn't figure out why this was better than some of the others, that there may well have been 2 or 3 or 4 staves of Chinkapin in there that they didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's always just been, I think the flavours you get from Chinkapin are incredible.
I only learned the other day that the Speyside Fest, someone in the tasting actually told me, which I had not known, that and I haven't actually verified it. I haven't looked into verifying it. So this may or may not be true. But they said that the chinkapin tree doesn't grow in chinkapin forests. It doesn't just grow by itself. It grows within forests of other trees.
Yeah.
So, like you were saying there, if a chinkapin stave might have ended up in some bourbon casks because it was probably chopped down thinking it was just a normal sort of what you would say is American standard oak or whatever. So, there is always that chance as well, and it's got great flavour to it. And the GlenAllachie spirit really works well with the flavour you're getting from the oak. Again, same as the French oak, medium char, medium toasted. So as I said, very, very similar in what we're doing, but the flavours are, hopefully people are picking them up, are getting quite different flavours from them. And that is, as Kat was saying, is a really fascinating, enjoyable thing about working with virgin oak. We had a little experiment with some, we'll say Far Eastern oak, and we were working with it and stuff. And it's really expensive. You're sort of over £3,000 for a cask, and then you've got to get it to Scotland, which is the biggest issue. And we were sort of working beside that, and we were thinking, surely there's another way to do this that isn't as expensive. So we tried to pick a genus of oak that was on the same longitude as this oak and where it was grown, in the hope that because of that there would be some similarities in flavour. So we actually delved in to get some oak from another country, and this is a very vague story because I can't tell you where they're from and stuff. And
we're all trying to figure it out, just working on our sort of geography or map of the world. It's starting with the Far East. We're on the same latitude.
So
the good trees there.
So we thought, right, we'll get this cask in. It's less than £1,000 a cask. Hopefully we'll get some of the flavours that we were expecting from this Far Eastern oak. And we were completely and utterly wrong. We developed something completely different. And that sort of says two things: that oak is, virgin oak especially, is quite unpredictable. You can't really gauge what you get when you're trying new virgin oak that you've never tried before. But also sort of describes the sort of company we are at the same time. That we've got the ability to try this. We had a goal in mind to try and do something that didn't cost us as much money, and we got it wrong. And we've developed something completely different. A different flavour profile, a different aspect of the way GlenAllachie spirit can work. But it seemed to have worked well. A very vague story, but maybe if you can work it out, or if you visit round the distillery, you'll be able to see some of the casks, and you can sort of see what we're looking at doing in the future as well.
If you're any good at Richard Osman's Where is Kazakhstan on the House of Games, then we'll have worked that one out. But yeah, some nice tasting notes coming through here. Tom's getting caramel and licorice, really enjoying it. Stuart, very floral, loves it. Where's my wallet? Maybe need permission as well, Stuart. I don't know. I would. For me, I'm getting sugar almonds all the way in the palate for me. And I love that kind of subtle nuttiness you get with chinkapin for me as well.
Yeah, I always find with chinkapin you get a sort of, it is like a nutty sort of bouquet. It's just walnuts and sort of pecans and chestnuts and like all that sort of, it's got a real sort of nuttiness to it, as well as quite a sugary sort of licorice, like the little licorice, like all sorts of sweets you used to get in there as well. It's got that sort of candiness to it, I find. Where the French, you sort of get a sweet, sort of buttery, oaky, sort of tanniny, not being a word, ness to it. But yeah, I think when
tanniny works for me. I think it's
definitely a word.
Yeah,
completely understand what you're talking about there. There's almost that kind of sort of almost the sherry effect in with the French oak as well, isn't it? That kind of that deeper, richer stewed fruits, the kind of almost kind of sherry. Yeah,
you do get a little bit more of that. Where the chinkapin is probably more useful, is the wrong word, but there's more of a sort of freshy sort of flavour profile to it. With the French oaks, just get a little bit more of a deepness to it.
I think I could probably just smell this all night. I feel like I'm getting better actually. Yes. Put that on the bottle. Cures you if you're cold.
Cures you if you're cold. Chinkapin. There we go. Chinkapin cures you if you're cold. Yeah. I just love chinkapin. I think it's amazing. I got the. I don't know if that was the first release or not, but just before lockdown, there was a distillery exclusive. You had the sherry butt, and there was a chinkapin. So I'm not sure if that was the first release or not of the chinkapin from So that would have been beginning of 2020.
Would it have been, because we've come out with a 12-year-old in the Oak series, and we've come out with a 10-year-old. So it might have been.
It was a distillery. It was just it was a single cask.
Yeah, it probably was the first one that we did, which is very typically us releasing something sort of nicely under the radar for people to try, and not explaining it in any way, and just letting people taste it and see what they think.
It was the old packaging. It was the grey packaging. The stone, the rock packaging, rather than the grey.
Yeah, that would be the first.
It disappeared all too quickly for me.
I think once maybe it's explained, or people are told what it is and why we've done it and what we were looking for, that it actually becomes quite more appealing.
But it was such a new thing then. I'm not going to say the distillery that I was listening to, because I would never do that. But there was another distillery doing a kind of question and answer thing just on Facebook or Instagram, I think it was, and it was a kind of a brand ambassador along with a master distiller from this particular place. And I just asked the question, have you thought about working with Chinkopin? And they didn't know what that was, and I was completely taken aback, because by this stage, I've been aware of what GlenAllachie were doing. I thought it was out there, but it just told me how rare and how, because I think it's actually quite difficult to work with as well. I mean, I my understanding takes a bit of management.
Yeah, Chinkopin oak does. It's not as easy to work with as, say, French or Spanish or sort of standard American oak. It is slightly different, but that's maybe why it's not as widely used.
Yeah.
And again, there are not too many companies. I would never say anything like this. It's not meant in a negative way, but there's not too many companies that have the ability to do what we're doing. You could probably count under 10 that have the freedom and the desire to want to actually go and try something that isn't widely done. And look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Then you think about how we're going to solve it later. There's not many companies left that can actually do that. And that's the great thing about working for small independent distilleries, is if you can try it, you can go and do it. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, then we've learned something new, and then we just move on from there and we try something else. And it's a fun way to look at try to produce and sell whiskey.
Absolutely.
We just want to release good whiskey, and we'll try interesting stuff in the hope that people like it, really, as the idea.
That's what you want to do in any line of work. I mean, there's nothing worse than working somewhere and you ask the question, why do we do this, and why can't we do something different? And you're told, well, that's just the way it's always been done. I mean, that's soul destroying when you work in a place like that. But if you work somewhere and you come in with an idea and people say, yeah, let's try it. That sounds like good. Let's give it a go, see if it works. That's where you want to work. In any line of work, that's the kind of place you want to be involved with.
In Aberdeenshire, we call it the Iwis factor. Why do you use bourbon and sherry? We've Iwis just done it like that. It's quite nice to make it a bit more inclusive.
Yeah.
I had absolutely no idea what you were saying there.
Aberdeenshire, you have to give yourself up here and get an education. Iwis factor.
Translation, it was always done that way.
It's always been done that way,
yes. I've between Campbell, Tony and Glaswegian, and having to speak to sort of Lindsay and Willie in the warehouse, I've got no idea what most people are saying half the time anyway. So
we'll just have to subtitle the bottom, you'll be fine.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Lindsay's wonderfully broad as well, isn't he? Fantastic.
Yeah, and sometimes I find myself understanding Lindsay a lot easier than what I used to, probably just from speaking to him more and more. And then I sort of have a thought in my head and going, oh no, am I actually starting to sound like that?
Yeah. And a little wee question from Mark Canning, just saying, why do you think the batch releases seem to be more popular than the single cask releases?
Why do I think something seems a certain way? I don't know. To be honest, I don't really have an answer for that.
No, I'm thinking that the batch releases are more usually widely available through, shops like ourselves and other places. I guess the single cask releases are often maybe only more available through the distillery, so maybe they're just slightly harder to actually access. So I wouldn't say there's any difference in popularity. I think they're both very popular.
I think we've sort of taken a slightly different tact as well with maybe the way that it used to be with GlenAllachie, or the reason we were doing things is when you're with essentially a 5-year-old company that's, in my honest opinion, doing remarkable stuff to break into an industry that's it's doing very well just now. Single casks are used to, one, get the name out there, get your foot in the door in certain things, and grow the popularity of a brand. You've grown the popularity of the brand, and then you change tack to start focusing on actually the development of the core range and what we're looking to do. And every time we take and bottle a single cask, it takes away a cask that we can put into the core range. So we've changed our sort of ideas slightly. We're reducing the number of single casks we're doing. That'll take time, reduce it over a number of years, reduce it down. One, makes them more exclusive, makes them seem that they're more popular, I guess, to mark, but we are trying to sort of increase what we're doing core range wise and sort of decrease our single casks, because we want our core range to be readily available and for people to be able to buy it. And obviously batch releases have a limited number. So the batch releases are popular. For the quality you're getting, at the strength you're getting, and how easy they are to drink at that strength as well, makes them very appealing to buy and to drink. And the as well as the single casks, apart from the PX and the All are also ones that we do, the big casks as well. A lot of our single casks are different and quite vastly different from what we do within our core range. So if you like GlenAllachie because it's hugely sherry influenced, and then we tell you here's a Marsala single cask, you go, well, that's not why I like GlenAllachie, and look, that's perfectly fine. Everything's not for everybody, so maybe that's a reason as well. But
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So the next whiskey is a very interesting one, and one I really like, and it's fascinating. And is when other people might have done the Chinkapin before, there's been even fewer people have tried the Scottish Oak, and that's what we've got here. So we've got the 15-year-old finished in Scottish Oak cask for a couple of years, 48% again. So if you've got any of the French or the Chinkapin left, let's try and do a little comparison as well. But the Scottish Oak sort of really stands out by itself as quite a remarkable virgin cask. I often find with the Scottish Oak, when you start to smell it, the nose you're getting quite a fresh lemon zest, buttery sort of flavour profile, or nose profile rather. But it's an oak which is obviously not used at all for really anything when it comes to whiskey. The trees are too short, the trees are too bent, they don't grow straight, there's too many knots in the oak, you can't really cut the staves by machine, so you have to cut them by hand, and they're usually quite porous as well, so they're an absolute nightmare. Nothing about what I've just said would describe, let's use that wood for storing something in. That sounds like a great idea. Because it's quite a tight oak as well. It's very different. It's very difficult to get the spirit into the wood to draw out the flavour. So it is a difficult cask to work with and to give time. I would always think with a Scottish virgin cask, you're probably looking at a couple of years longer than you would finish anything else really to allow that sort of development of flavour. There's one cooper at Speyside Cooperage that is able to build Scottish Oak casks.
Oh, really?
So
just one.
There's one guy cuts his staves by hand, builds the cask. Then they give Billy a phone and say, "Do you want these casks?" And we say, "Yes, send them over." So right now we've got some Scottish virgin casks in the warehouse maturing away nicely. There's another 30 being created, and all 30 are coming to us.
So just to clarify, there's only one actually physically able to do it, or one that's allowed to do
it? Probably a combination of allowed and has the skill, because it's not the same as making a French cask of the Quercus Alba, Quercus Robert, or anything like that. It's something completely different. Staves are cut by hand, and then it's built, and then it leaks like a sieve anyway, because that's the type of wood it is. There's one cooper that makes them.
So that's quite remarkable. I mean, anybody who's listening in tonight who's actually been to the cooperage up at Speyside and actually watched these guys work. I mean, it's mind-boggling. You just couldn't imagine being able to do what they do anyway. But to then take that up another level to only one of those amazing guys actually being able to work with Scottish oak tells you how unbelievably difficult it is to actually make that cask. Yeah,
it's a difficult wood to work with. It takes time. One person's making it, and as I said, sort of by hand as well. There's no machinery really in it, and then you've got to get it into the warehouse. It does take a little bit of time. And again, when the option of Scottish oak became available, I think Billy would have snapped your hand off to get them all. So yeah, I mean, it produces absolutely fabulous flavors that are different from the other virgin oaks we've tasted, or really any virgin oak that I've ever tasted as well. The Scottish oak just stands out by itself and is really, really good. Is really, really enjoyable. Yeah, and it's better than any of that old French muck that those French people were speaking about.
I've never had a virgin oak that tastes like this before. I've had a few different virgin oaks from a different distillery that experimented with terroir, and this is like, it's like you wouldn't even know this is a virgin oak. This is amazing. It's like lemons, and it's amazing. This is really good. I'm done tonight now, guys. I'm away. This is this is fantastic.
It's got great layers and levels to it, the Scottish oak. You can take it to sort of face value, you pick up a lot of the flavours that you can get. And then you sort of delve into it, it's just packed with different flavours that maybe you wouldn't really expect. I think it's sort of a little bit of sort of cracked pepper, but it's quite creamy as well. And as I said, it's like a lemon meringue cake. At times, yeah. I find it's absolutely fascinating, and it's great to be able to work with spirit that's been in these sort of casks. Because remember when we first tasted this, when it'd been in the cask maybe a couple of weeks, the first sort of Scottish virgin oak cask we got, and we tasted it, and it was just sort of like, this is a couple of weeks. The injection of flavour from the Scottish wood is very, it bursts on, and then it sort of slowly the development dies down a little, and then you sort of need to leave it a little bit longer. But we were sort of fascinated from it from the start, and yeah, I think working with Scottish oak is then piques your interest, and then go and try and pull casks from other parts of the world and see what they do.
Do you think that's to do with the structure of the tree, because it's a much slower growing because of the climate? It's much more open and allows more of the spirit to absorb, or do you know what the reason behind it is?
I think that would come down to your toasting and your charring level. We've went medium char, medium toast for this, what we're tasting now. We're actually going to go for more a heavy char in the next batch of casks, because we think that it'll help the spirit get into the cask and really sort of pull out different flavours. And so again, those are tiny little changes within. You're burning it for just a couple of 10 seconds longer, 20 seconds longer, and it can have a real different change of flavour and pull out different flavours. So again, like if you're able to buy a bottle of the first one and then look at the second one when they release it, and actually the difference is charring level, that's a really fascinating thing that whiskey, that within independent distilleries you're allowed to sort of roll with and see what actually happens. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to the next batch whenever the cooper can make them, and then we can get them into the warehouse and mature them. Yeah, so it's
a lot of kind of points coming up. I totally agree, Gavin. Absolutely tremendous. And the lemon meringue, it's there's a kind of creamy lemonness. It's not a lot of citrus on the nose. And the taste much more creamy. So that's the kind of meringue bit coming through, I guess. There was somebody asking, gosh, that was a good question. The Angel Share. What's the difference? I mean, with this being a bit more porous and a bit more leaky, what's the difference in terms of Angel Share with the Scottish oak?
So, to be fair, for where GlenAllachie is, sort of the foothills of Ben Minnis, we're quite a sheltered area, so the actual evaporation within the area isn't as high as other places. The whiskies hold their strength. We fill it, traditionally it's been filled at 63.5, but we sometimes fill it at 69. It holds its ABV quite well. And Angel Share, to be honest, I don't have the answer totally off the top of my head about the differences. I haven't heard Billy complain about it.
Okay.
which would suggest that it's not as high as
not a
what
big issue.
it's not a big issue, or maybe it's as high as what we expected it to be. But yeah, I haven't heard Billy complain about it, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
I mean, if it was going to be massively high, you would think, that was a fun experiment, but let's just bin it.
If it was massively high, we could afford to keep doing it. So it's obviously not so high that we could continue to do it. And then you go in. So we've released this. So we've theoretically got some or second fill Scottish virgin oak casks, which I know doesn't make sense, but the only spirit that they've had in the cask is GlenAllachie, and it's Scottish oak. So the next time we go in, it's the same with that sort of Far Eastern cask we were speaking about. The next time you put spirit in, it'll not be as porous. You'll get different flavours coming out of the wood as well, and it should help with the sort of development of the flavour that you're getting.
Yeah, much more citrus than some of the others.
That's absolutely brilliant. I could sit and drink that for half an hour or something, and just let the sort of air get in and really open it up.
Absolutely.
I wish I could, but I think it's sold out in the shop in what was it, Russell, 7 minutes or something?
Yeah.
I've got a bottle in the house if you'd like to buy it.
I mean, I thought you were going to offer to share it, but you went straight into buy it. So
we could teach you Doric and share it at the same time.
Okay.
So I don't know what happens at Middleton. Rob's got a good question. Maybe you'll know more. Well, hopefully you'll know more than me, Rob, and maybe Kat, you might know. Just asking, would it be possible to do single tree Scottish oak barrel? So a cask from one single tree, similar to what Middleton do?
Off the top of my head, I would say probably not, because of the tightness of the wood and the size of the actual tree and stuff like that. I wouldn't say it was possible. Maybe Middleton are doing it. I would be surprised if they were using Scottish oak. I don't think so. That's maybe a question for the Cooper. We should once we release the second batch, maybe we should get that one Cooper on and he can sort of tell you how much he hates when GlenAllachie put an order in for Scottish oak casks.
I'm definitely going to have to find out who that is and get him onto our Thursday blether, I think, for sure. It's Stuart. I don't know. Talking of the angel share, is the distillery looking into ways to reduce the pollution caused by it? Is anybody actually doing that? I mean, I guess the fungus that grows around distilleries is all the angel share, isn't it? And that's
I know there's angel share. I am not clever enough to know of a way that you could reduce. So you have angel share, you have evaporation. I'm not clever enough to understand how you would be able to stop that then getting into the atmosphere or to getting outside and then in pollution.
You'd have to have some kind of ventilation system, but I mean the angel share that's escaping is that lovely smell that you get anytime you walk past the distillery.
Yeah, and you're right. The fungus and the mold that grows inside, especially Dunnish warehouses walls, is because of the alcohol in the air. Generally as a distillery, we're trying to reduce pollution and sort of energy use and try to offset it as much as we possibly can, and our water usage as much as possible with in that side of things. But I can't get my words out. Specifically about the angel share, I am not clever enough to be able to give you an actual answer.
And I also don't know if any distillery is actually doing it. I know there was people sort of trying to sue a distillery somewhere in Scotland, I believe. There was a new housing estate built beside a distillery, and obviously all the houses started to discolour. My thoughts on that were the distillery was there first. They should have the builder should have actually been telling people there's a chance your house may discolour because we're beside a distillery. So it wasn't the distillery's fault. But yeah.
Because if you drive up the road to GlenAllachie, when you get to just before it opens up in the ponds there, if you look to the left hand side, there's a sort of bank of trees, and those trees are black.
Yeah.
So
that's a way of maybe avoiding houses being discoloured, having trees in between that would kind of catch
to stop it. But so whenever GlenAllachie would have ran coal or peat for any reason, and to heat the distillery back when, that smoke was obviously then discovered the tree. So these things can happen. But
so we're on to the second reason possibly, and I can imagine maybe Kat the same as me, is why we don't own a bottle of the 15-year-old. But the price was a bit steep for my budget, and Dave's asking why it's so expensive for a 15. But I mean, from my point of view, it's a rare oak. It's harder to produce. So I'm thinking that's the reason why. But
we want our whiskies, and it was similar with the Spirit of Speyside release that we've just done as well. We want our whiskies to be accessible so people can open them and drink them. Our plan is in no way for them to be bought and then sold off at auction or for someone to make a profit on it or anything like that. Our idea is that people open them and drink them. We do have to pay for the cost of the wood. That's not something that we can afford to not do. We wouldn't be around for very long if we constantly made a loss on the wood that we buy. What we try to do with innovative oak and having one cooper build the cask and then buying them and then letting it mature for a while is, you don't drop all the cost onto the one bottle or that release. You try to space it over time. But that's maybe why this 15-year-old was more expensive than the other 15-year-old or core range 15-year-old that we have. It's because the one cask or the single Scottish oak casks that were used to make this up were more expensive than the PX, the Oloroso, the Rioja, and the Virgin Oak combined for the other releases that we have. Unfortunately, that's just what it is. If Scottish oak was more readily available and everyone was maturing in Scottish oak, then it wouldn't be so expensive.
Absolutely. Gavin saying he had a bottle in his basket from the shop, decided the RRP was too high and didn't go for it, but he realizes now that was a big mistake. And I from my point of view, as far as GlenAllachie is concerned, I think that everything that's come out has been very, very competitively priced up to now. So there's always going to be a reason. If something's high or a bit higher than what you're expecting, then there's a reason behind that, because the 12-year-old when it came out to begin with was a steal at the high end of 30-odd pound, of less than £40 for a absolutely fantastic 46% 12-year-old whiskey. Everything's gone up in price now, obviously, just the cost of living and all that. But price point for me with GlenAllachie is very, very competitive, and
we don't set out when we're coming up with the release to think how much can we make for it. It's what can we get away with, in the sense that how do we make this as affordable as possible for people to actually open it and drink it. We've got absolutely no need to overprice bottles because we think that we can get away with it. It's not what we're about. It's not the way we are as people that work in the company. It's not what we are as a company. We want people to open our bottles, and unfortunately, sometimes that is too high for some people with their budget. Personally, for me, I've never bought a bottle of whiskey over £100 because I would regret it if I then opened it 100 or less. So I feel that as a whiskey consumer as well. There's whiskies I would like to buy that are over £100, but I've set myself a limit because I know I would open it and then regret it. Unfortunately,
the wonderful thing about tastings like tonight as well is there's always a range of whiskies from affordable to something that you possibly wouldn't be able to buy, but you're getting to try, and I think that's a wonderful thing about tastings, that you get an opportunity to try something. Lots of people are getting a lot of chocolate.
Lots of people are trying it with chocolate.
Yeah, Joe's trying it with dark chocolate. Ross is having it with a fierce beer chocolate stout, a great combo. So that kind of notes are obviously coming through.
Whiskey and stout is always a good call. That's my go-to. Yeah, definitely.
One or two people definitely going to wait to open their bottle now they've sampled it. Maybe the same as yourself, that kind of expensive bottle, keeping it for a special occasion, but thinking, you know what, I'm going to have to actually drink it because it's too good. Keith, so you went. We have to do. So we're just finishing the Scottish Oak, Keith. We've had the Chinky Pin, so we're probably just about to go into the White Heather fairly soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, no, we love doing tastings, and it's all about sharing. And there's a realization that a lot of the whiskies that are on the shelf aren't affordable for most of us. So the best, whenever we do any kind of tasting, we always try to make sure there's a range of things on there for something that people can definitely buy, and a bit of a treat on there as well, something you wouldn't ordinarily get to try or taste. And sample sets usually come in, fairly reasonably priced. So thanks, Tom. We appreciate that you appreciate. So yeah, cheers. Burst of coconut for Stuart, trying it with chocolate. Interesting.
Yeah, I could get that. If somebody mentioned something earlier, I thought, where was it? I've lost what it was, but there was someone described it. White chocolate. There it was. David. White chocolate. Yeah, white chocolate is something that I get quite a lot. It's for me, for the Scottish oak, it's not got that sort of deep sort of mocha, coffee, dark chocolatey sort of flavour. It is more sort of white chocolate that you get in sort of lemony zestiness of it.
Ron's put up a link about the evaporation, so thanks for that, Ron. I'll have a look at that later on. Have a read. I'd be very interested to actually read about that. Yeah. Which Scottish politician was it that wanted to know? Yeah. So this was the one I'm on.
They've managed to spell whiskey wrong in the.
I was going to say that. Which Scottish politician spelled whiskey wrong in the article?
Well, there we go. Yeah.
A politician making a mistake.
We shouldn't judge.
Go figure.
We shouldn't judge. I'm on a tour. I'm taking a tour group away up to Elgin tomorrow. So I promised myself I would only definitely finish one tonight, and it's gone. The Scottish oak was going to finish tonight, but yeah, that's just superb.
I'm going to finish this one because no way I'm going to let my husband try that one. That's fine.
Make sure that's gone before you leave the room.
But I know we didn't get that sample. It's really rare. It's gone. It's
Well,
amazing.
yeah. So Sonny's just telling Keith we're still on the Scottish oak, and we're just gonna.
I think we'll move on to the White Heather 15, which is again a new release from White Heather or from GlenAllachie Distillers Company. It's a blended Scotch whisky. It's a brand name that was acquired when Billy acquired the distillery. It was a big blended whisky in France, maybe mostly in America and Canada as well, and once sort of Shiv has started developing other blended whiskies, White Heather was sort of lost. It was put in the cupboard, but once the distillery was acquired, it was one that Billy really sort of focused on to re-establish the White Heather blended whisky. We started with a 21-year-old, and then we've released a 15-year-old this year. This is Billy's 50th anniversary as a blender within the industry.
50th.
His 50th anniversary, and
right.
We wanted to come out with a blended whisky that you're pulling together. The great thing about it is you're pulling together other distilleries that you wouldn't necessarily think might work together. There's a little bit of Islay in there, there's some Speyside, a little bit of Highlandness in there as well, and obviously GlenAllachie. And you're piecing all this together with some grain whisky and trying to create something that is very palatable, very, very enjoyable. It's full of flavour. Good strength to it as well. It's 46%, and we want to sort of show people that look, blended whiskies can be absolutely brilliant. And I think the 15 and the 21 we do for the White Heather really showcase that. And you're taking someone who's been in the industry for 50 years and putting them in their element. This is what they started doing 50 years ago. This is what they do to the best of their abilities. Is creating blended whiskies, taking different parts, putting it together to make something that is actually really, really, really enjoyable.
So I guess we're going to start a little debate about the whole blended subject, and sort of single malt snobbery, if you like. I had a customer in the shop a couple of days ago looking for a really nice bottle with a budget of round about or just over £100, and I highlighted a couple of things, and I also included the 21-year-old White Heather on their list for consideration. And because I said it was a blend, even though I said who made it, and it was somebody who didn't know an awful lot about whiskey, but they were looking for something, immediately dismissed the blend. It was like, well, I think we can rule that one out, and focused on the other two or three that I'd kind of suggested to him. And so, I mean, everybody that's on here tonight, you know, we all love Billy Walker. I think we're all probably educated enough to kind of realise that blends are fantastic whiskies and shouldn't be dismissed. But how has it been difficult to kind of introduce this, you know, on the back of the fantastic single malt releases that have come out of the distillery?
Not overly in that sense. I think once people try it, they realise what we're actually doing. White Heather as a blended whiskey wasn't that I've never heard of it before. It wasn't something that I could pick out as being a blended whiskey growing up, and it wasn't really overwhelmingly popular, not popular, but wasn't famous or anything in Asia. So for my markets, it's sort of just the introduction of a new blended whiskey. Australia, New Zealand, there's people of the older generation have heard of it, may have tried it. Same with Canada and America as well. But yeah, if you break it down to what it actually is, a single malt is one distillery. A blended whiskey is multiple plus grain, and you're putting it together. There is theoretically more skill required in putting together a blended whiskey than there is a single malt, because you're taking different components that you've had absolutely no control over up to a certain point and making them work. Obviously, the blends that you're able to just buy in your everyday pub and stuff cloud the sort of premium blends. I mean, if it wasn't for those, there wouldn't be a Scotch whisky industry. If it wasn't for your Johnny Walker's Reds, your famous Grousies and your White Mackays, there wouldn't be a Scotch whisky industry. But to put together different distilleries into a vat and blend them together and then into a bottle, and they'd be able to produce something of the quality like we've got here and the quality that other distilleries are putting together with blended whiskies. There is a huge amount of skill and effort. It's not just luck to think that we put a couple of Speysides together and we add a 4% of an Islay distillery in here just to give it a little bit of additional flavour. A lot of time, a lot of skill put involved, but then to dismiss blended whiskies as not being good or not being par with single malts. I could tell you quite easily this blended whiskey is better than some single malts I've tried hands down from other distilleries. And there'll be other blended malts that are maybe better than GlenAllachie, and that's perfectly fine. But to dismiss blended malts blended whiskey, would just be silly. You're closing your drinking capabilities by just dismissing blended whiskies. The flavour profiles and the characteristics you can get from a vast number of different distilleries combined, it's a huge range, and you shouldn't dismiss that so suddenly. Try it. And if you don't like it, that's fine. But at least you tried it.
Yeah, we completely agree. I mean, Rob's kind of hit the nail on the head there with funny how times change. In the past, blended whiskey was regarded as superior to malt whiskey. And it still is, Rob. The fact of the matter is that when people come into a whiskey shop, or certainly my experience, people come into a whiskey shop is that they want a single malt. If they're going to be given a gift to somebody, they want to know they're giving them a single malt, and they won't even entertain the possibility of this being a blend. It's just it's a word that then makes them completely switch off from that conversation. So it's really quite difficult to. But we're talking to the converted already tonight. Everybody on here already understands that, but it is definitely a conversation from working in a shop point of view and getting customers in who don't know anything about whiskey. They're looking to buy a gift for a friend who does like whiskey, and they've heard of the word single malt, they've heard of Glenfiddich, they've heard of Macallan, and if it doesn't say that and single malt, then they're not interested. It's trying to kind of share that kind of knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah. I think Keith makes a good point though. He says with a blind tasting, you probably wouldn't even be able to pick it out as a blind.
No, not at all. Yeah, absolutely.
He's absolutely right, and I think whiskey's slightly odd in this sense that its quality is essentially defined by words rather than the actual quality of the spirit. Age, single malt, if it's a blend or not a blend. These are words that define whether somebody wants to buy something. It's nothing to do with how it actually tastes, and which is really what you should buy. You should buy because you like the taste of it, or it's good quality. But it's bought because of other things. And as I said, to dismiss blended whiskies when they can be as good as this White Heather or as good as some other places is not mad. It's not as far as madness, but it's getting there.
Yeah, sometimes budgets are right, Dave. Yeah, depends what you can afford. But we won't talk about other products tonight. But there's a particular blend that we have in the shop that sits at £23, and it's absolutely fantastic value for money. So whether you've had it before or not, Dave.
That's my Wednesday. That's my Wednesday seller. I sell that all day Wednesday.
Yeah. There's a couple of blends that are phenomenal value for money. But this is quality. Yeah.
One of my go-to, and I know Billy's Billy's actually the same. Go-to whiskies that you could sit and have a drag. Johnny Walker Black.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
because of the consistency. Yeah.
If you want a whiskey, you can actually just sit down and drink, and forget about try to analyze it or do any of that sort of stuff. You don't get much better than the Johnny Walker Black for that, and that's one of the biggest blended whiskies there is.
It's like there's a time and a place for a McDonald's burger. That's what you want. You want a burger that tastes like a McDonald's. That's it. You know what you're getting. You're not having to worry about brioche buns and knives through the. You've got it in a wrapper, shove it in your gob, you eat it. You know what you're getting. Absolutely. Jeremy's asking, do you blend the batch and bottle it immediately, or do you vat it in your own casks for a while first?
Yeah, so we'll it's a great question. We'll get the casks into the distillery from the various distilleries that we're using, and we'll re-rack it into wood that we know that we have the control over. We know the province of the wood. We know what's been in it before, and then we'll get it into those casks. So we'll get it into the distillery, into GlenAllachie, a couple of years before we're looking to bottle it, really, and get it in a wood that we think would work with what we're trying. The White Heather is pretty similar to other casks that we use, a little bit of PX, a little bit of Oloroso, tiny little bit of red wine in there as well. And we've got control. We know what happens in those casks before. We know what's going to happen in them after we put the vattings in. So we change cask types. We don't just rely on maybe what would have been in before. We would like to have an influence in the flavour profile that we're trying to develop.
Ross has asked a tricky question for you. What's your preference, Ronan? Do you prefer the 21 or the 15? He believes the 15 isn't for him, but he thinks the 21's like the GlenAllachie. Yeah, well, high praise indeed. So very high standard, but this is sublime. So the 21 or the 15 for you?
I would probably have to say the 15. Maybe more sentimental. It's one that I've been more heavily involved in what we're trying to release. But the price point to flavour to enjoyment. I think the 15 for me is one that you could. We only produce such a small amount of. It would be one that I would rather I was able to go into a shop and continually buy and have it as a sort of everyday drinking whiskey. I would go to 15, but the 21 is similar in cask makeup, similar distilleries, or the same distilleries as we use, but the flavour profile is just slightly different because of the age. There's maybe a slightly more deeper flavours coming from your sherry casks, and any sort of the hint of smokiness that might be there from the sort of like 4 or 5% of the vatting from being from an Islay distillery is so subtle. It's almost turned into sort of a creamy sort of smokiness in the background. But I often find with White Heather it's very, very subtle.
The first time I tried this, I got a drop of it up at the distillery when I was passing by, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. I haven't had a bottle yet, but for me, sort of anything between 10 and 15 is a sweet spot in whiskies for me. And I mean, a bit of that is dictated by budget, but there have been very few 18, 21 or 25-year-old whiskies that I've enjoyed, but I've not liked them so much that I've thought I need to get more of that. I thought, that's fine, but I'm actually more than happy with my 15, my 13, my 11, whatever it is I'm picking up. I do think there's a sweet spot there between 10 and 15. It's just bang on,
Yeah, no, I tend to agree. There's great whiskies that are between 20 and 30. You can try one if you're lucky enough to try ones that are older than that. But they don't hit every mark for you. They're really good, but I'm only ever going to try this once. And in reality. But the 10 to sort of 15 mark is where you sort of go.
Yeah.
And I like it. It's full of flavour. It's really enjoyable. I can drink it all the time. I think I could buy it again. It's got it in that ballpark. It's really good. But yeah, I'm probably the same. 10 to 15 is where I would buy whiskies. Because I know I'm going to open them and drink them and try and enjoy them and stuff. So yeah, that's where I would go with that.
And the possibility of getting it again sometime is it's a bit of a draw as well, isn't it? Yeah, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. If you can buy it again, that's what you're wanting.
Rob's made an interesting point, actually, and I think it's a really good one, that we also, not only do people sometimes dismiss blends, but also grains, because there's some absolutely phenomenal grain whiskies out there, and they're affordable, pretty affordable, yet, as Rob says, people do turn their noses up at it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In a previous life, when I worked for an independent bottler, we released some great single grain whiskies, single cask grain whiskies and stuff, and they're absolutely brilliant. The age that I would find a grain whiskey to be really in its sort of prime is higher than what we were just speaking about with malt whiskies. I think once you get to 17, 18-year-old grain whiskies, you're really in a flavour that is sort of butterscotch and popcorn and just creaminess and marzipan and almonds, and absolutely delightful. I do think it's just a slightly higher age when it comes to grain for my sort of palate, personally. But I do agree with Rob. You can get some absolutely stunning grain whiskies as well. It's just being a little bit more inquisitive and try to find things that are maybe slightly different or not the norm. And there's absolutely crackers out there, yeah.
For sure. Yeah, Stuart, I'm the same as you, Stuart. It must be good. My glass is empty. Yeah, mine. So I was only going to drink one tonight. I've actually ended up drinking two. So
evaporation must be bad at Foggy tonight, Russell.
It's I think it was the humidity in the air. I think that
it
was
must be.
I shouldn't have left the window open. That was the angels. The angels have run away with it all. Yeah, absolutely.
So we can move on to the last whiskey, seeing how glasses seem to be empty.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So this is good. Going back to GlenAllachie, going back to a single malt, we're going to try the 10-year-old batch 7, cask strength 56.8, PX Oloroso bursted with flavour, mocha, cinnamon, ginger, full of flavour. A little bit of red berries, red currants, sort of slight sort of. I was obviously like strawberries, like praline or praline, however you say, a sort of Turkish delight sort of flavour in there. Strawberries, a bit chocolatey, and then there's a little bit of sort of virgin oak, American virgin oak in the background. Absolutely stunning. Everybody here, I would presume, rather than just a wide statement that everybody knows. Everybody here, I would presume, knows about the batch releases that we do. They've really developed since sort of batch 3, then batch 4 was particularly a favourite of everybody's, world best whiskey at the time, and then from then it's just went through the roof of how popular they've been, and it's absolutely fantastic. Billy and I sit down and start work. We probably work on 2 batches ahead of what we've released, and after batch 4, we sort of looked at each other and went, "Oh God, wait till they taste batch 5," and then it was wait till they taste batch 6, and now they might not be to everyone's preference, but we're always being competitive with ourselves and try to release something better every time. I think we're both quite competitive people, so it's sort of like we want batch 8 to be better than batch 7, and then we want batch 9 to be better than every one we've ever done, and then so on and so forth. So there's a real drive to try and produce some unbelievable whiskey.
I love that. So yeah, not a technical note, but oofed. I think that probably is a technical note, and it's definitely a tasting note. And
we're all thinking it though, aren't we?
I think when it comes to the 10-year-old, it definitely is a very good descriptive word of what we're tasting here. It's just a brilliant whiskey. There's not a lot I can say about this that will enhance what you're actually going to get from it. It's nosing it, it's tasting it, and just thinking, yeah, this is great. And it's at quite a high strength as well, 56, still quite a high strength. And the dangerous thing about it is that it doesn't necessarily come across that high, which is quite a dangerous thing, because you could easily just sip away at this, no bother.
Yeah, if you didn't know any better, you wouldn't know that was cask strength.
No. I'm loving these tastings. We're not bothering with the subtle hints of this and waves of that. We're going with oofed and banger.
It's a banger.
The best tasting note you can get when you do a taste about whiskey is silence.
Yeah.
Like if you're in a room and you've got 40, 50 folk there or whatever, and you try a whiskey, and no one says a word because they're trying the whiskey, that's the best tasting note that you could really hope for, because everybody's just enjoying the dram.
Yeah. It's like the silence that happens when you serve some good food. You know, the room's buzzing, and then you put food down, and then it's like silence because everybody's enjoying a really good meal.
And then someone says, you can tell the food's good because no one's saying a word.
Exactly, yeah.
Inevitably somebody says that, and it's true. And it's the same with whiskey. If you serve a good whiskey, and it's sort of liked by all, that you can have silence in the room for a good minute because people are just enjoying what they're actually drinking.
Yeah, that's incredible.
I think Dave's comment, thank you, Dave. This is definitely going to help me feel better. It's definitely working already.
Well, this is bizarrely my very first 10-year-old of any of the batches.
You've been missing out big time.
I have, yeah. They just don't hang around long enough to get a hold of them. That's the problem.
This is my first one too, Russell. You're not alone.
There we go. A couple of 10-year-old batch virgins. So yeah.
I think we'd be amiss not to point out Russell's epic T-shirt tonight as well. I can't believe you haven't actually shown the crowd what you've got on tonight, Russell.
We don't. This is the Billy T-shirt, isn't it? Be more Billy Walker.
Yeah.
We don't pursue absolute consistency. We pursue absolute perfection. Be more Billy Walker. Yeah.
He's got a drive. It's true as well. He's got a drive from someone in their 70s that is I've never sort of seen before in anyone. And the drive to be innovative and look at new things and do things slightly differently and want to produce better and better stuff is second to none, really. I was doing a video for one of my markets in Taiwan, and they were wanting Billy to sort of introduce a whiskey that we'd done for Taiwan. And he randomly, a couple of years ago, just came out with, we want to be the best whiskey in the Speyside Valley, and we want to beat Macallan. And I thought, you need to stop. You can't just come out and say stuff like that. And he says, no, that's true. That's what we want to do. When people think of Speyside, we want them to think of GlenAllachie. For someone to have that ambition, to go against what would be one of the big guys is brilliant. And things like this 10-year-old cask strength that gets better and better every batch we do is whiskies that are going to take us in that direction. We want to be the best Speyside Valley whiskey distillery. And that's essentially the goal. That's the goal of the whole company, really.
But I mean, it's it's a no-brainer that things are. I mean, without dismissing Macallan, because Macallan's got its place in whiskey, and so has every other whiskey. But you're talking about a 12-year-old 40% Macallan for almost £80, and you're getting 15-year-old 46% absolute sherry heaven GlenAllachie for £10 cheaper, or sometimes more. I don't know what Macallan 12 is now. There was a £20 difference for a while between the 15 and the 12 Macallan, and there's no comparison as far as I'm concerned. And
and without trying to speak out of turn or slate anyone, but there isn't really a comparison what we're offering. But when the majority of people would think of Speyside, Macallan is up there with one of the ones you think of.
Of course,
we want to be in that conversation.
Yeah,
that's the aim. And you have aims and stuff, and that's what you go out and set to achieve. And we think we're well on the road to try to achieve that. And it's great to have that ambition and drive with somebody that's been in the industry, as I said earlier, for 50 years, to still have that sort of desire to want to go out and try and be the best that we can possibly do. It's great. It's great to then be able to tell people that this is our goal and not sort of shy away from that as well.
So a lot of love for Billy in the chat there. Tom, you have to visit a distillery. It's just a great day. Sitting beautifully just below Benrinnes. I mean, the whole area, Aberlour, is fantastic. Round about there is amazing anyway. But
it's absolutely lovely, and it's strange when you visit GlenAllachie, when you see the distillery and the way that it looks. It's looking really good just now. And you come down the sort of bend of the trees, and this distillery sort of pops out of nowhere. There are a good number of warehouses on your right hand side, and then you approach the actual distillery itself, and then you sort of think, why wouldn't you have let people come and visit this distillery? Like, no one would have been allowed on that site for years and years and years unless they were working on the site. And you just think, why not? Look at the quality of the spirit they were making. They were making good quality spirit. And it's such a beautiful distillery, the grounds that it sits on, that you just think, gosh, maybe missing a bit of a trick there, but this distillery is one that you would want to visit. It's in a great location. And Aberlour is lovely as well, and there's great distilleries around about it that make you're able to do a little sort of tour bubble around there. But no, it's absolutely brilliant. I would highly recommend visiting and doing the tour and meeting Karen and the team and Lindsay and stuff. They're brilliant people.
I think one of the nice things I heard Billy Walker say was when he spoke to you and Mike Russell, and he said that with distilleries, like, we're only ever custodians of these places, so it's our responsibility to leave it in a better condition for the next generation. And I think that's a lovely way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I mean, and GlenAllachie is clean, it's tidy. Graham did so much work in the renovating a lot of the buildings and a lot of the kind of the woodwork and things as well. Just absolutely superb. And you're right. You see some of the other distilleries that are kind of just lying kind of slightly idle just now in the industry with fantastic settings and some on the side of railways that have got lovely kind of features that would make great visitor centres and what have you. You just wish that a lot more would be put into the industry in terms of visitor facilities, if you like. But GlenAllachie has definitely got all of that there, and it's very, very welcoming. Fantastic spirit, great people. What's not to like?
Oh yeah, definitely. And I think Billy's comments about being custodians and that sort of says a lot about what maybe Billy thinks about himself and what he's doing. And he's a good guy to work for and humble, and he's a good guy and looks at things the right way. I think he's producing good stuff and understands that there'll be somebody after that wants to take GlenAllachie or whatever, or any distillery he's ever been at, and you just want to pass over the best you possibly can. It's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, definitely. I need to come and visit. I haven't been yet. But like half the guys on here want to come visit as well, so I reckon we should just get a bus, share the fare and just have a day.
Absolutely. We've just got to be a bit more Billy Walker. That's what we've got to be. Well, listen, guys, I hope you've I think you've all enjoyed tonight. I hope you've enjoyed our chat. Certainly, Ronan, thank you very much for talking us through the whiskies. It's been great getting your insight into what's going on in the distillery and learning about what's going on with yourself and your own career path. And as I said at the start, I'm not sure if it was before we went online or not. I think everybody here would be jealous of you and wanting to have your job for sure. It sounds like great, but yeah, it's all hard work, as we say.
Yeah. No, it's been an absolute pleasure to come on and speak to you and showcase some of the stuff we're doing, and hopefully give you a little bit of insight in what we're trying to do in the future as well, and why we're doing things. It's all about drinking whiskey, trying to enjoy it, and it's just learning a little bit more of what we're trying to do, really.
Absolutely.
No, it's been brilliant.
Thanks very much, everybody, for tuning in tonight. Thanks for joining us. I know you've enjoyed your whiskies, you've all said as much. But please go to the distillery. Please go up and visit. You'll have a fantastic time up there. You'll be made most welcome. But also pop into the shop. We like to talk GlenAllachie as well, and we're happily share that with you in the shop as well. So, good night from us here just now, and we'll hopefully see you all again soon. Slange.